Welcome to Stormwatch by GreyNoise Intelligence. Each week, we cover the latest info on what's happening at GreyNoise, Census, and Vulncheck, take a look at a roundup of important and timely cybersecurity topics, toss out some expert opinions, and drop the occasional conspiracy theory. I don't normally do this. I'm going to apologize in advance for the rest of this intro. Today, the crew is rising up, back on the street, and hanging tough with Mark Elzey, principal security researcher and all-around amazing human at Census, to learn how to stalk malicious prey with Eyes of the Tiger. The odds are definitely stacked against you if you're an Ivanti kit, and we discuss how Nominet is now in the thrill of the fight to scope out the damage from a zero-day exploit. And so many times it happens too fast when unworried defenders and researchers get caught in the trap of a weaponized exploit. The team briefly shares some safe approaches to POC handling, and time permitting, we check in to see if the U.S. Treasury has the will to survive after news of a second China-sourced breach, and then ponder whether GreyNoise users will let suspicious thoughts and tags creep into their minds and intel feeds as we roll out a brand new classification for 2025.
How do we start protesting these intros?
Right? AI Bob.
No, that was not that was all me. That was all me.
Oh, that was handwritten by Bob.
No.
I timed it too. I spent 37 minutes on that this morning, like at around.
Are you adopting the speaking cadence of the AI chat GPT dialect?
I'm trying to do that so that no one knows whether we use AI or not anymore.
I mean, I guess we don't even know if that's actually Bob.
It's true. I have no clue anymore.
I have.
If AI Bob writes something, did AI write it? So
this is very true.
Yes.
So I was gonna go around and ask everybody how they're doing, but can I just get like a thumbs up or thumbs down if you guys are doing good or bad today? One thumb up, a couple thumbs up. Yeah, not really surprised. Yeah, both Glenn and Emily always. Yeah, wow. I'm just exhausted, but that's great. Overwatch, how you doing today? Since we have no actual questions to ask anybody today. I was surprised Ashley and email me. Everything's awesome. All right, this is great. So before we actually get into what did that come from?
Everything is awesome. The song from Lego Batman.
Yeah, but
Lego
like movie.
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
Well, everything so like we're gonna talk first about a non-awesome thing. Just I feel compelled just because it's terrible. What's happening over in California, the wildfires is just devastating. I've been watching a lot of pictures and movies and comparison movies of before and after, and I just can't believe the devastation. So if y'all haven't helped already and you're looking for places to help, this is a vetted thing from the AP about safe places that you can donate things, money, etc. to help the victims. There's going to be a lot more. It seems like it's like a never-ending thing right now with the winds happening. It's just not great. I'm just really thankful that Jordan, who has been an LA denizen for a while, is safe. So I'm glad you're safe, Jordan, and please stay safe and keep safe. We have a podcast, as I think you know, because you're listening to it or watching it, or you're here right now with us. Our Overwatch would be really happy if you went to this box and put in your email address and subscribed. We don't spam you, and we don't sell your stuff to anywhere, so we will be glad to give you cool information. And you can even like sign up for the noise letter while you're over there too, because like it's a pretty fun little thing we put out every month. And I'm going to bring this back down real quick. And Mark, welcome to the pod again. This is not it's not your only appearance, your first appearance, but you're now the center of attention for quite a while today.
That's great. Thanks for having me. This is pretty awesome. So I guess I just start off. Do I just start talking?
Yeah. If you want to tell people like what you do at Census, and then start an intro of this cool thing we're going to talk about, which is Censeye.
Yeah. So I've been working at Census for about 4 years, and I just go hunt down things, figure out ways to fingerprint software. Very recently, I've started going down the route of looking at adversarial infrastructure, locating C2s and all that kind of cool stuff. For a while, I was dealing with critical infrastructure things, hunting down documentation about obscure protocols and trying to understand what they do, and then figuring out safe ways to kind of probe that data, and then talking about it on a large scale. And so, just recently, I think I was talking to Emily, and it was about an ICS related thing. And, the thought came across was like, wouldn't it be cool if we just had a tool that kind of did that the things that we do in order to like initiate a hunt. And, you know, hunting in Census is basically going to our website and then looking at a host and then finding all of the fields that are associated with the service and then clicking into individual fields and seeing if there's anything else on the internet that has those specific things. So it seems like, you know, you're probably thinking like, oh, that would be easy to automate, but I don't, for some reason, we never really kind of like did it. So I just came up with the concept of like, wouldn't it be cool in Census, we have all of this data associated with every single service. All that data is, you know, hierarchical. So, you know, with HTTP, we have, you know, all of the key values and certain metadata about the response data broken out into their own key values, you know, and on top of that, we have TLS information, and all that information is broken out into their own key values. You know, even metadata about certain things like the issuer of a TLS certificate is broken out into their own certain fields, like common name is broken out. So that, you know, at a you know, a zoomed out view, it's not very interesting, but all of those little pieces of information can be used to pivot into and to find other hosts that have that data too. So the idea is like, what if we just had a script that went through every single field that Census has and then see what other things exist with that specific field? And so that's kind of how it started. And yeah, so so there's a Git, so it's open source now, which is kind of cool. And it's kind of like an amalgamation of all the things that I've learned over the past 4 years of using our data, all of the API endpoints that we have to get data, to munge data, and to render that data in different ways. And so, yeah, I think we have there's a image up here, which is the basic outline. So we fetch data about a host, we extract all the key values, and then we generate other search queries to go and report on that data. So it started off with, we looked at every single key value within Census data, and we quickly realized that, you know, a lot of that data is just, you know, a lot of those key values are not very useful for finding other hosts. So we created like a, you know, a filtered list, like a whitelist of certain keys that we are interested in. I don't know if I can share. I'll share it in a bit, but from there, now we have like a whitelist of keys that we're interested in, and then we can go grab a host, and then we generate reports. So we have a reporting API endpoint too, and that report just generates me all of the hosts that match that specific field within Census data. And so the idea is that I have a link here by a researcher named MB Research, which kind of like solidifies the general concept of, can I post links? I don't know how to post links.
You should be able, if you don't, you can give it to us in Slack and we can post it too.
Okay. Yeah. So somebody named MB Research, who kind of like went over the general concepts of pivoting in Census data specifically. And here we go. And the idea is that the interesting host to find correlations between one host and a whole bunch of other hosts is that if you have 1 million matches to a specific search, it's not that interesting. That means that there's a lot of things on the internet that have it. But if there is, you know, anywhere from 2 to 100 matches for a key value, then that means there's something unique about that. And there's certain fields where it's even more indicative of something really interesting, like an SSH host fingerprint, for example. If more than one host has that, there's a pretty good indication that there's some ownership there between those two hosts. The same with certificate fingerprints. If you like take a SHA-256 of the entire certificate and you search for that, it's going to be very specific to an organization or a domain name or whatever. So the idea was that we can kind of like, I wanted some way to report on all that data and see very quickly who has this interesting information. So I posted the link here. And one of the things he kind of points out here is that the more host, kind of what I just said right before, the more host you have, the less interesting it is. The lesser host that you have, the more interesting it is. And then we kind of like started doing, attaching more ideas to the general concept, which was like, so we have this whitelist of fields that we're interested in. And now we have a concept of what is an interesting search query, which are the hosts that either have more than one host, but less than some arbitrary number. So we have like all these guardrails in place at this point. So the next logical step is just like, okay, so we generate this report for a single host. Let's take the interesting queries that it found and then automatically start pivoting into other hosts that have that information and do that same thing. So like you have this depth search. So you can start from one host and it'll automatically go find interesting search queries that matched a small number of hosts, and then look for those hosts within Census, grab their data and do that exact same thing. And you could do this, for an infinite amount of times. In reality, I usually do it like a depth of 2 or something like that. Does that make sense? I feel like I've been
no, it absolutely does. I guess my first question is, so y'all made this just to get people to buy more Census credits, right? That's what it sounds like, because it sounds like this is going to burn through a lot of query points.
So I was not even thinking about this being open source specifically because of that point you made, is that we have, there's a luxury of working at Census that we have unlimited queries. So I don't really worry about that at all. And so when it was proposed that we open source it, I'm like, are you sure about this? Like this could really take out somebody's queries. And they said, okay. Interesting enough, I still see people using it to do things. I made it so there's a lot of configuration options to make sure that you can tailor it to what you think you have a limit of. Like you can easily add or remove fields. There's every single whitelisted key that you're looking for has its own weight to it. And the weight goes from 0 to 1. And the point of that is that if you are using the auto pivoting feature of the utility, that you could say, I care more about SSH fingerprints than I do about HTTP headers. So you give it HTTP header of weight of 0 and an SSH fingerprint of weight of 1, and then you could set a pivot weight argument to say, like, I only care about anything that has a weight of 1, and that is the only time that it would pivot into those other hosts from those things. So yeah, it does use up a lot of queries. Yeah, it is a query hog.
It sounds like you have taken like your brain, Emily's brain, Himage's brain, everyone else's, like other researcher brains at Census, and tried to put that intelligence, and that's a lot of intelligence, into this one tool that lets kind of everyone pretend that they're as smart as you guys, and not in a bad way. I don't mean that people aren't generally intelligent, but they don't do this for a living. You actually do this for a living. Has it saved you all a bunch of time when you're trying to do, because I know you work very hard on a regular basis. I read all the rapid responses. Everyone else should read our rapid responses. You're going out there digging and finding things. Has this saved you all a lot of time when you're trying to do some of this fundamental internet security research?
So for me, it's not like an end-all be-all tool. It's something that I either run to get an idea of what a host looks like, or have it like run in the background while I'm doing other things. For me, once I get into about 2 pivots away from the original thing I'm looking at, I tend to start forgetting, like, how did I start this thing? I'll go from like a host to an SSH key to a cert to a banner that I've never seen before. And then I'll be like, well, how did I get from here to here without like writing it all down? So if it's anything, it's me. It's a good automated way to like document how I got from one place to another. Because if you are doing the automatic pivoting stuff, it generates this nice tree of like what host that you start with, what host it found and how it found that host. So I could easily go and see, yeah, this is how I got from point A to point B. For fingerprinting services that we haven't seen before. It's been very valuable because we can easily go and find something that's uniquely identifiable for that specific thing that we're looking at. Yeah, there's that pivot tree. So, you know, we started this 5.188 host, and then from there, it found that 5.178 host via the SSH host key, and it kind of like, you know, goes and does that forever. Yeah, so we're constantly like, you know, like for like ICS or for actually just leave out ICS, any sort of software that we go and we find a host that we think might be that software, and then we kind of verify it. Then we can like run this utility to get all the fields that might be something we could use to apply a software label to it.
So if I were to try to make so for folks that haven't used it yet, like first of all, if you're not using Census or you need to be using Census, whether it's the ASM or whether you're just looking for your stuff or doing other kind of threat research, it's a great platform. Go to the workshops. We do joint workshops with them, and you'll learn a ton about how to actually do threat research. Is this kind of like a CLI Maltego or Maltego? I don't know how to pronounce it, but Maltego for Census, is that kind of like what this, because you're basically building a bunch of graph relationships with a bunch of the different, you know, metadata components of all the hosts and coming up with a way for folks to do an exploration of those things. And like, that's kind of sort of how Maltego works in a more GUI or in a more graphical sense. Is that a fair comparison?
It is a fair, we don't have as many of the other things that Maltego has. And in fact, like that is something that we've been looking into doing, which is a Maltego plugin, which basically allows you to, because right now it's kind of, it's unchained in reality. Like, if you don't know how to tune all the weights and all that kind of stuff, it can kind of get out of hand real quick. But if I envision something like a Maltego interface, which would lend itself very well, we could say like, oh, run this thing on this host, and then it gives you like all of the fields that it matched. And then you could manually go and right click, well, find me other hosts that match this field. So it'd be something that would allow the user to control it a little more. Yeah, it's definitely a lot like Maltego, and it's something that we're really thinking about doing an integration with. Yeah.
So I'm hogging all the questions for Mark. Does anyone like? And I don't want to do that because
I have. There's some more. Questions. So there's some more other stuff that it does that's interesting. So like,
then we should do that. So if we'll pause on like you all are gonna have to hold your questions. Sorry, because I want Mark to talk a bit more about this.
So some of the other things it does is like, you know, if there's certain fields like, it finds a TLS certificate common name, it'll then take out that common name and then look for that domain, because, you know, the idea is that there might be a domain as the common name value, and then it'll just look at the entire internet for just that domain. And there's the idea, and there's other things that it does, like if it finds an open directory, it'll parse out all the files in the HTTP response in census data, and then look for other open directories on the internet that have that same file name. So like it not only does the exact matching of the fields, it also like takes a lot of these fields and then munges it around and creates extra census search queries to find that same data in other places. Another more interesting one is that like we do a lot of, you know, on our free time, we'll do a lot of this, the idea of like determining what unknowns are in our data. So we have like a lot of unknown services. So we can look at those services and try to get an understanding of what they are, try to guess what they are, do Google searches, try to, you know, look at different patterns within the response data that we got back. And so there's another thing that it does where it kind of takes the concept of a lot of binary protocols will have fixed length fields. And so we'll take a response from an unknown service, and then at 1, 4, 8, 16, 32 byte increments, it'll wildcard that out and then generate reports on the number of hosts that match each wildcard. So the idea is that we would have more matches for smaller bytes and less matches for the longer bytes that we have. And so that allows us to kind of hone in and figure out, is there any pattern to the binary data that we're receiving from unknown services? Yeah, and there's just all kinds of weird stuff that it does. Yeah, okay, we can go for questions, or I can do a demo, whatever you all want to do.
Demo. Unmute Bob.
I was gonna.
I know. I got it. Well, before you just before your questions, you also been busy. You got, I don't know where you find the time, folks, because you just keep cranking great stuff out. What are the I haven't even had time to dig into the gadgets part. Like, what are the gadgets component of this that you released like very shortly after you just launched the actual project itself?
Just gadgets is a cooler way to say plugins, but we have two types of plugins where we have query generators. So, we'll pass a host result to the plugin, and then from that data, you can generate queries that you would like to, get reports on. So it's just a easy way to kind of extend the core functionality of it. And then we have label plugins, which just allow you to take host data in, and then in the output, you can label it in certain ways. It's just a way to kind of so right now, I think with labelers, we can do virus total lookups, threat fox lookups, and then, just have that data, in the output. Some of the core ideas around it is it's all in the terminal, and you can pipe data in, and you can, the very Unixy approach where pipe in, pipe out, and then filter and output. So you can stream data from standard in, stream IPs, you can stream host names, IPs, or any sort of data that can be searched in the internet. You can stream an input, and then it'll automatically start fetching all that stuff in the background and then generating the report at the end. Yeah.
Cool.
But gadgets are just a way to extend it. Yeah.
Fair enough. So Hamid, I've cut you off. You should take the question round starting now.
You're all good. My first thing wasn't a question; it was a comment, but I can add a question mark at the end of my tone. I was going to draw similarities between. This is basically kind of like the census equivalent of the IP similarity tool that you all have at GreyNoise, except for instead of internet noise, we're looking at infrastructure. So I think that could be an interesting use case, is pairing the two together. And kind of mapping noise and payloads versus what the infrastructure looks like. Because to your point, I know you joke, yes, we're replacing our intelligence, but a lot of times when you're mucking through just the sheer number of raw data fields that we capture, the human eye can get tired and should probably be away from screens sometimes. So it can help to have something that automatically pivots for you, and also a way to really easily retrace that chain.
Yeah, and there's other interesting things that a lot of times you don't even think about while you're doing it. For example, Censeye, when it sees a certificate fingerprint that only matches the host that you're looking at, it'll actually go back into Census and say, give me all of the hosts in the past that have presented this specific certificate. And then if you are doing the auto pivoting, it'll actually use that historical host information to pivot even further into current day data. So that's just extra steps that, you might forget about if you're just doing it all manually. Yeah.
I do have a question as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, go for it.
So you mentioned something that I have encountered a lot in my work at Census as well, which is when the pivot lands you a smaller number of hosts, it's yay, my job is easier. Because in most cases when you're hunting something, a smaller number or a smaller group of hosts is more significant. But then you also mentioned that you've kind of come up against trying to quantify what's the arbitrary upper threshold of that. So how did you come to find how big of a number of results is not significant, and then how do you figure that out for different use cases?
That's a per use case thing. But when I was starting out, I was doing a lot for looking at all the hosts that we already have labeled as C2 or malicious infrastructure. And so just kind of eyeing up and going, I'm not a very scientific person, to be honest. And I think it defaults to 300 now, is the ceiling. And that was just something where it didn't seem too out of the ordinary. But in the cases of looking at malicious infrastructure, the reality is that the stuff that's super interesting are the things that match 5 or 6 hosts in reality. If it goes over that, then that's a case, for example, if it's an SSH fingerprint and that matches 1,000 hosts, is that interesting, or is that just a default install from a VPS provider? Really, in my mind, the lower the better. So if you see 4 SSH keys across a whole bunch of different autonomous systems, that's way more interesting than, 100 SSH of the same SSH key on the same AS, if that makes sense. So it's really about just figuring out what you're looking at, and then trying to come up with your own numbers. Look at what generate a bunch of reports, and then figure out what is a good solid ceiling for you.
Any more questions from folks, or do we want to let Mark try to anger the demo gods and see if we can get?
Oh, I'm rooting for demo for sure.
Okay, let's see.
Wind it up.
All right. Share screen. I'm gonna minimize all of my bad things. All right. So I have a few things I just kind of want to show off. So one of the nice things about Censeye is that it does a lot of caching. So you're not constantly eating up queries. So if it's seen a certain key value, you can just pull that up real quick. So I'm actually going to be showing you a lot of things that are already cached. So the demo should not fail at all. So here's just a look at one host, and I'm just kind of giving this as an example because it's pretty easy to understand. So this is all the fields that it kind of decided to look at are these the SSH host SHA-256, the banner hex, and then all of these things. And the things that are highlighted are within the threshold that I defined as the defaults, and these are more than one host. But less than 300 hosts. And what it does, it highlights those things for me, keeps all the other ones in there so I can still look at them. And then it also shows me a list of the interesting search terms. And all of these, are clickable if your terminal supports it. So it'll automatically take you to those match services. And I think this is, I especially picked out this example because I'm going to show you what a depth search. So I want to go anything. So what a depth search does is that for every single of these that fell within our mins and max, it'll go grab a list of hosts that match those fields and then do those same reports on those. So we'll see, there's a whole bunch of response that came back with. We can go look at those individually. It gives you a final, all of the searches that it found that contained our limited host counts. And then it shows you the pivot trees. So from this host, 109.107, we found this host, 138.124, because of a specific banner. And then it found this, and it found, looks like the rest of these, because of the SSH fingerprint. So there's a bunch of hosts that had the same SSH, and, so it kind of displayed that. I want to show here real quick the idea. This is kind of, so this came from a Lumen report, and it was a host back in 2023. Let me pull up, it's one of these IOCs here. It's their KV botnet. And I just pulled up that host on that day. And this is the point of this is to show off certificate history too. So we have all these certificates that were found on this host. We have this certificate, which is found on 0 host currently, because I'm looking at a historical host. I'm looking at this host back in 2023. But we have this little parentheses here is plus 43. And that means that we actually saw this certificate on a whole bunch of different hosts in the past, ranging from 2023 to 2024. So it kind of gives you a link to all of these hosts where that certificate was found in our historical database too. So that's one of those things. So if I did a depth of 1 here, this might take a while because I actually haven't cached this. Then what that'll do is it'll actually use this, if we look at here, it's actually using the historical host data and we found this 1.36.165 via this certificate that was present in census on, the 30th of 2024. But we also get current day data too, like things that are matching currently that have that certificate. Yeah, so that's how you can use like historical information within census, both to get the report on or to generate further reports on in pivoting. There's a good example of here's a sliver host. So this is running a sliver C2 multiplayer host, and this specific certificate was seen at different times in 2023. Hopefully this won't fail. Yeah. So if we go, yeah. So it's found on these old hosts back in the day. So the point is that these hosts are most very probable to be owned by the same operators. And to kind of give an example of what I was telling you about unknown services and how so we'll see here, it's called Nobbler, which is the plugin to look at unknown services, and we'll look at, which one is this one? Okay, so this was something that I kind of was looking at the other day, and it shows me that with only 0x5748, there was 92 hosts, but the bigger that we allow this unknown service to get, there's less number of hosts. So with this specific example, I think this host is still up. We'll go see here. It's here, right? It's this unknown service, and it's got this, starts with WH1, HHH, but there's a whole bunch of things that match that in our data. Let's see, yeah, there's like 26 hosts, and they're all unknown services. So like, I'm going to go and just hit that port that was there, and I'm just going to write this to a file, which I'm doing here. And this is kind of like the things that I do. I'm trying to figure out what this service is. And then here, I just strings it to get an idea what it is. Obviously, it's some sort of binary. Data bin doesn't really have any bin walk data bin. Might have something more different. Yeah. So there's definitely something like elfy about this. So then I just strings it, and I just saw this thing that said metal-u. So this looked very interesting to me. So I just kind of like, I ended up like just searching for this on Google, and this, now it's just giving me the definition. I'll be like service, network, something like that. Or I'll just do like security, and I can't find anything. But what it actually ended up being was a Metasploit code generator. So it was actually like, binaries for using within Metasploit. And so all these services here, these are all Metasploit payloads. How they're specifically used, I don't really know. So another good example of using that technique was on this here. So we have all these. Let's see if this host is still up. Yeah, it is. So we got like all of these unknown services here. So it generated several queries. But the shorter that you got the queries, the more hosts it had. So I started looking into this specific protocol, and just did protocol. So I started like searching around for like these different byte offsets, and I eventually found out that this is a protocol called HL7, which is a medical records protocol. So from this data, I was able to. So yeah, it's not good. But yeah, so that's some of the things that. we use this for. And, you know, I'm
How
constantly.
did the three of you sleep? If I did what you did for a living, I mean, this thing is a rabbit hole of just like
That's what I was
have,
gonna
like,
ask.
strings on. This is like the demos. First of all, Mark, the demo is amazing. Like, you actually showed off more than the blog post could even begin to remotely cover. And like, I just want to stop the podcast now and go play. I mean, I'm not, but it's kind of what I want to do. This is incredible. This is a huge, and now, and just to react to what Hima just said, holy cow. Yeah. Like, if you had an API endpoint to query the IP sim for an IP and layer that in, and if we talk to this thing to get more features for the ML model, for like, wow, just wow. This is amazing. This is
Yeah, how do
absolutely
you
truly
ever
amazing.
stop looking? It's just feeding you this fire
Well,
hose of
luckily
layers.
it's my job. So like, it is definitely a rabbit hole where you'll just go from one thing and you'll just spend, like I said, a lot of times I'm just running this in the background at all times. Like, I can do, like, for example, I'll just do this query, which I'll take an input census search CLI, and I'll just look for C2, and then I'll parse out the IPs, and then I'll run it on all of the C2 servers that we already have. So I can kind of like look, is there anything that we don't have? And there's this argument called the query prefix. And what I'm doing here is that since I'm feeding it hosts that are C2, that we know are already C2, I want to generate these reports, but I want to prefix any of the reports it generates with not labeled C2. The idea is that we can find other hosts based on these C2 hosts that we don't already have labeled C2. So I also allowed you to, I also put the log level to info, so we can actually see the queries that it's kind of like running as it goes on. So it can be slow, by the way, because it is hitting API endpoints. So we're watching the problem with it, which is this. And this is why you have it running in the background. But the idea is that we can now see a report. Here we go. And see how all of these come out as 0. That's because, you know, these have 0 matches because we're looking at a C2 host, but we're looking at the report of this field prefix with not labels equals C2. But there are some interesting ones here, like this issuer DN. It says Sophos, but there's a lot of Sophos on the internet. And the fact there's only 26, 25 matches is kind of suspicious in itself. Are you trying to, it might be somebody pretending to be something else. So like, yeah.
We're gonna have to put a warning on the audio version of this episode to say, just go watch. Sorry. You have to just see this. You can't just listen to this show today.
Oh yeah. Hopefully people have a screen. I can describe.
Awesome. This is awesome.
Thanks. I also put in the virus total labeler so we can get an idea of like what's already in virus total.
So what is the future of Censeye and Censeye gadgets?
Well, just recently I've been adding a couple things here and there. Like, for example, some of the things within Census, the key, how the key values work, you have to do like special things with them in order to create searches. You know, just recently with some talk about around LDAP, I added the ability to search LDAP attributes automatically. The future is, I've been trying to learn like UI stuff, like in order to create what I envision as like an optimal UI, and whether that be using Maltego, as we discussed before. I have my opinions about Maltego, so that might happen with me, or we have other engineers at the company that are wanting to implement with Maltego. So something like that, something to make this a little easier to use, where you have more control over what it's doing in the background. Other than that, who knows? That's the cool thing about this is that, I'm writing this for me. First off, it's for me to be lazier. And so the only things that are going to go in are the ones that we actually end up using at some point in time. And that is interesting to us. So there's never going to be like fluff or anything like that. It's just the things that we use that are very valuable to us.
Luckily, like identifying everything on the internet is one of those issues that's like unscalable almost. So I don't think they'll ever run out of things to identify.
Yeah, definitely. There's always like some weird one-off thing, and then you'd be like, "Oh, I want to chase that down." Yeah, definitely.
I have a stretch goal for Census and Censeye for this 2025, and that's for this to be in the background of some like B-roll of some movie or news story of a hacker, like someone's using this in the background.
Yeah, I was thinking that like this is instead of running HTOP,
It's better than just in-map scanning.
Right. Yeah, I can run Censeye in the background, make it look super cool hacker.
I'm just picturing like a giant TV wall in your place that just has all of these running all the time.
Just doing 0.0/0, and then every single host doing it. Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, in long term, I'd love to see something like this, like literally built into the product, where I can go to a host on Census and just the fact to see all of the hosts that match that specific field would be very valuable to me, and I think a lot of other people. So like, yeah.
Yeah, this is just absolutely. I really appreciate taking the time. I know we tried to make this happen in December, but I'm really glad it happened at the beginning of the year. I hope everyone that hears this watches it and then also goes and grabs this thing and starts playing with it. I mean, both because it's an amazing tool. You'll learn a lot. You'll find a lot of info about threats, and you'll also like help them to make a lot of money after you put quarters in the credit machine. So that's really cool. I'm going to, unless anyone has some questions, I think we're going to move on to some of our topics. We have about like 12 minutes left, so you all can you can pick which ones we talk about, either the people that are in the peanut gallery or everyone that's in the team. What do you want to talk about first, or should we just go to the nominate one?
We can at least mention them all. Like,
all right, we'll get. All right, let's see if we can crank. Let's see if we can like just a whirlwind here. We're gonna pick on one of my favorite things to pick on, which is Ivanti. And so they're in the news again. Like, as I said, the blast radius just keeps getting larger and larger for this particular one. I was telling the team here that like I was initially very concerned about this one because it was a breach of the UK domain registry Nominet. They are a very large domain registry in the UK. They used to be the registry for and domain issuers for the co.uk. And when I learned they weren't that, I became a lot less concerned. I'm still concerned. So I guess I want to figure out what other people's reactions are to this one. Like when you saw this, like what was your immediate reaction to this?
My first thought was, yeah, a domain registration running Ivanti in 2025 was where my brain short-circuited. Like just at the get.
Add that to the bingo card.
Oh yeah, we're working on our 2025 bingo card.
Working on our bingo card. What
I'm actually sorry,
I guess just to clarify, like what would a domain registrar be using Ivanti for?
They use it as a VPN appliance, so I'm sure that they have a bunch of remote workers.
Yeah.
Can I give a shout out to Tailscale one more time, folks? Like that can solve a lot of your problems here. It's I mean, like we don't work for them. I don't have any stock in them or whatever, but you don't need to put a port out on the internet. You just have to run Tailscale. Yeah, it listens on a UDP port, but unless you have a properly configured tailnet, nothing's going to know WireGuard's running on it. So you don't need to actually expose anything. And it's way nicer than any VPN I've ever actually used before. And there's other things like Tailscale. So it doesn't have to be Tailscale, WireGuard in general. But I mean, like rather than say go buy another thing to stick on your perimeter, why aren't we seeing more recommendations from CISA and CSC, whatever, to use WireGuard? Like why aren't we? Because this seems to be an easy thing to just start the new year off, just wipe everything clean, begin with a brand new approach to how you do remote access. Like why are we still seeing this?
I think it's more about the management of the infrastructure, right? So Ivanti puts a nice front end to all of the administrative side of things.
So you're saying because they like, you mean like a UI, like the experience of using it is good enough that
for like
credit?
Large scale operations, like you have the user management, it has like usually has like LDAP support and all this kind of stuff. So it's easy to integrate within your current infrastructure versus like if you're just starting with just your own VPN, there's a whole lot of things you got to configure and add on to it. Might just be a spin up type thing.
So what's the over under on another domain registrar getting a big bad breach notice this year?
I don't know. Because I wouldn't have, I just don't know the day-to-day like workings of a domain registrar. That's a very specific industry, I think, personally, because they're not like a domain registrar is not necessarily, I don't know. There's like a front end to all of that. I'm trying to think about the architecture of a domain registrar. Right? I like it. It's novel. It's interesting. I want maybe another one so we can see the consequences.
You want another one. Okay, so so we can increase the sample size a bit more. Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
you don't know what you can do till you try, right? So
Exactly.
Wow.
They said that it didn't, I don't know, Nominet, of course, is like no evidence of data breach or leakage. So I would think that data is not necessarily like the valuable info here. Isn't it the infrastructure itself that's the valuable thing? Like,
Well, I mean, I guess to a degree, like they do have to care about like the leak of customer data, and they probably have millions of customers, I would assume, just because of
Yeah.
like they have tons of domains that they do this for. But you're right. Like I was more concerned over like what did they do once they got in, and did they get any API keys that let them make things happen in domain land and things like that.
yeah, I guess that would still qualify as a data breach, though, if they
Yeah.
got any operable API keys, because that would be, if I'm an actor and I want to do suspicious things, I would want unlimited access to a domain registrar. That'd be pretty sick.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess to close the section out, I am just glad that the UK has as good as maybe slightly better than CISA with the NCSC agency who's helping with this, and they help with all things like this there. So if they're watching out for them and they're helping do the investigation, like it will at least be done thoroughly, and like they'll take care of it even if they can't talk about it outside of there. So I'm glad that there's a little bit of a safety net there, unlike maybe if this had happened in some other countries, which is great. The other one, which is like, I guess every week we're going to talk about a treasury hack now. Is that like how many departments does the treasury have? Does anybody know?
How many weeks
more
are
than
there?
two.
Yeah. Because this is like I didn't even know what this how do you even pronounce that one? Right. It's the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And they fell victim to the Beyond Trust API key leak, as just like the Office of Foreign Assets Control did as well too. It's just weird that like both entities of the Treasury were the ones that were kind of caught up in this particular attack, because I didn't look. I was actually going to poke at this, but I didn't have any time. Like more agencies use Beyond Trust than just the Treasury. So I'm curious as to why we've only heard from the Treasury. Like it's great they've been forthcoming about this, but I think we're going to probably see more downstream impact from this as the year progresses. But the going to the Treasury twice, it just seems kind of bad. And I think in the pre-show, you all said that there's some like amazing, excellent researchers that have been doing a lot of research around stuff like this, or at least this agency. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think going for CFIUS is kind of interesting, right? Because it's the agency or the committee that kind of adjudicates on foreign investment in the US, and of particular interest is like Chinese investment in US based companies, real estate, tech, et cetera. And there's some really, really interesting research by Dr. Ellie Rostum. She's at Johns Hopkins, but she's doing some super interesting stuff, kind of investigating sort of the hold that Chinese investment has on organizations in the U.S. I think I can drop a link to the website kind of that details some of the research. But I think it's super interesting because like until I actually saw her talk at LabsCon last year, I didn't realize like how big of a thing this was. But she kind of walked through some examples of like, here are all these different branches of, you know, US based organizations that have subsidiaries or partial ownership that's foreign. And I certainly think it makes sense, right? That, you know, an alleged Chinese-based actor or China-based actor would be interested in understanding where CFIUS might fall on, you know, some of the investments that they want to make or are planning to make. So I just think that's super interesting from like a geopolitical angle. I don't know about the Beyond Trust piece. I think it's sort of, it's been quiet otherwise, which I think we'll hear more soon, I would imagine. I don't know anything. I'm just speculating, but like, I'd be very surprised if other organizations aren't also affected by this. But I do think the fact that CFIUS in particular has been affected is kind of interesting.
Yeah, after seeing her research, after realizing, like connecting those dots, this seems less surprising actually, or less random, because she did a lot of work to really dig into the connections, whether it's by physical location, by financial, moving monies around, like whatever. And so, and I don't know that, I can't recall the sources of her research, but I assume it's probably mostly like open, like OPSEC, you know, like open source, OSINT, sorry. But then to take, you know, kind of use your imagination to see like what the committee would have on the inside, like, okay, yeah, like as we look at the state of things and the state of things that are being threatened or said, this kind of totally checks out now.
Well, and you even think of, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. No, you go. I
was just gonna say, even as a more maybe tactical or practical example beyond just maybe investment in real estate or high level investments in companies, think about, you know, potentially white labeled products that are here in the US that are manufactured by organizations and sort of they get this other brand slapped on them, but they've been manufactured in China. And so there's that kind of thing too. We've discovered devices where it's like it looks like it's a US based company, but actually when you dig a little deeper, they're not. They're actually headquartered elsewhere. So I don't know. I think the layers of it are really interesting, and her research did a really great job. Just even at the high level she talked about it at that conference, really went to illustrate how kind of complex this sort of ecosystem is.
The one thing that was coming to my head as I'm thinking back on some of the stuff we just talked about, some of the stuff we weren't talking about because we weren't together at the end of December, but also this, it really does seem that these very well resourced attack groups are just poised and waiting for the next O-Day, the next API key leak, the next thing. Like they know what all these agencies, they seem to know what these agencies are running. I don't think they got lucky for this particular set of ones here. It just seems a little ominous that like they're able to take action so quickly after one leak happens to come out for something. And I'm not even sure like if the leaks were caused by those groups, that might have been caused by other ones that were out there too. So it just seems like it's gonna be a pretty crazy year if this is the way that they're gonna be poised to start doing some of these things.
I need a shirt that says like China is my asset management company or my asset inventory, like database. CMDB. China is my CMDB.
Wow. So wrong. You want to talk about this one, Glenn? So this is all yours, the LDAP nightmare situation.
Yeah, like very briefly. This is more of like a reminder of a PSA of sorts. But you know, when you're spelunking through the internet and you find a POC, especially for something like very new, don't run it blindly. Like if you can't decipher it on your own, then maybe you shouldn't copy paste and launch it. But basically, and this happens, you know, several times a year, but this is kind of the latest one. It picked up some steam. But Trend Micro found, so basically, the company that put out I think the first POC for this, what their name evades me. But the Git was forked, and then after it was forked, it was altered to include some info stealers. And then that was kind of started to be used to circulate the POC. So basically, a POC was put out legitimately and then altered with some malicious intent, and then that one got some traction. And so some researchers were, well, I don't know if I want to say researchers. Some people were getting that POC and launching it and kind of putting themselves in a bad situation. So, just because it says POC doesn't mean it's trustworthy. And use caution when you are playing with armed software on the internet.
It's really this story is such a good vantage point reminder for me, because Voncheck, we see this pretty frequently where there's those POCs that are quite obviously fake, and just it's always crypto, always 100% of the time crypto.
URL shorteners asking for crypto.
Yeah, and it's so funny
with for
because
rm.rf,
it happens all the time, and people I forget that people don't double check, and people will run these, and I always hope that the vast majority of the time it's just not people on an enterprise network. But if Trend Micro is reporting on it, then this has definitely happened multiple times on
a how did it actually that would be interesting. How did it get from A to enough alerts to Trend Micro? Wait a minute.
Yeah. Also interesting.
Just a little PSA
to the more official patch, I guess. There's some kind of more official resource that got
check
forked.
your sources, go to the GitHub of the company that has the blog that's reputable. Use common sense. It's basically the same as when there's a national disaster, as we know, and people put out phishing or scams in that fashion as well.
Yeah, and just I will maybe out of character go. Given how quickly everything is paced these days, I'm surprised this isn't happening public, getting more public information about this happening on a regular basis, just because everyone is in a rush to do something, and being able to get to defending your org faster is sort of what people keep doing on. I think to your point, to the points that you all were making, thoroughness and patience are probably more important than being first to react, and that's probably what caused this particular one. We're almost at the end. We're gonna hold off on our little sus introduction. You can learn about sus on the website and our docs, but we'll probably cover it more in depth next week. I just want to add for the last one. I don't think my census comrades here are going to talk about this on their own, so I wanted to showcase this blog entry that just got put up the other day. It's on the 8th. So not very scientific survey, but I had an opportunity to ask a bunch of security leaders about certificate transparency logs. Out of a whole bunch of them, only about 10% knew what certificate transparency logs and that were actually required, that you really have no choice but to monitor them if you want to keep your organization safe. And I just thought this was a great intro post over at Census for how you can use Census to do that monitoring of the SSL TLS certificate generation for your org, and primarily to to see if anyone has done something terrible, because we have seen instances where certificate authorities have been compromised. There was a Brazilian one at the end of the year last year that they were actually generating Google search, which is that's almost one of the worst searches that could be faked right now. But if there's anything rogue happening at a CA, you can detect that here, and then just if anyone's doing just adjacent stuff, that's something that is also on here. Actually, I'll throw a last cue to Mark on this one. Is there potentially a way for you to augment Censeye with adjacency, like basically homoglyphs and adjacency searches for stuff like this, or is that not in the future of Censeye?
I don't think that's in the future, but yeah, I'd like to hear more about that.
Because you might be able to use Censeye to actually get a leg up on there just beyond what you could do with the overall searches that you all have. I know your ASM does it too, but some people could just let it do all the work for everybody too. Cool. I am amazed we did this in an hour. Everybody, you've been amazing. And Mark, thank you for that demo and the introduction to what Censeye is. I think everyone should be looking at this,
awesome
share it
demo
with everybody. Yeah, it was great.
Thanks for having me.
Burn up your credits, apparently.
Do it. It keeps our census folks warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Yeah, definitely.
Just keep on creating new accounts.
Oh, stop, Mark. No.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. All
I'm
right.
joking. Joking.
Yeah, yes, he is joking. He is joking. At Consensus Management, he was joking that one. All right, everyone, that's a wrap for this installment of GreyNoise Stormwatch. Whether you're transforming your threat hunting with go-go Census gadgets or calling for the cyber bomb squad to disarm booby-trapped exploits, remember, there's barely a 1% chance you'll be targeted as heavily as the U.S. Treasury has been. So keep your fishing nets tight, your vulnerabilities patched, your threat intel sharper than a spear fish. And until next time, stay noisy and may your logs always point to a clean slate. Take care, everybody.